artifact system in Call of Dragons is one of my favorite aspects of the game. However, these artifacts are difficult to obtain, and it's important that you invest in the right ones. And which ones are really good and which ones fall a little bit short might actually surprise you. Now, I have used an overwhelming majority of these artifacts, so let's get right into the review, put them into a tier list, and talk about which ones are the very best. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Call of Dragons. And when we review an artifact, there are several things that I'm going to look at in doing this evaluation. The first thing is, what are the stats that we get on the artifact? Now that comes in two forms. There is the dust that you put in the artifact and the star upgrades that you put in the artifact. In addition, we got to look at, of course, the effect that's on the artifact and if it has any special synergy or requirements, like for example, this gold crest is really designed to be used with Freygar. In addition, some of these artifacts, like the gold crest, really benefit profoundly from the auto cast feature, so we are going to reflect that in the rankings as I go through and do some of these reviews. So let's jump now into Tier Maker and rank every legendary artifact in the game. All right, my friends, this is Tier Maker, and I'm sure you've seen this before. S is the very best, D is the worst in our tier list here, and then I'll have a special space for some utility legendaries that I think are still pretty sweet. Now we're going to start with the best of the best, and I think Mirage Orb belongs in that list. This is a relatively new artifact. It is giving you attack for your mages, which is outstanding. And it does damage and a stun, and it hits multiple targets. Y'all, this has got to be one of the best artifacts in the game, hands down. It is very, very powerful. I did not actually go for it this season because I'm actually not using Bertrand and Tohar in this season. That's probably topic for a separate video. I'm running double infantry instead of double mages. That's my game plan. But I think that if you're using Bertrand, which many people should be, this thing is fire. It is fire. On the topic of fire, I mean, of course, let's put the Infernal Flame up here. This is really designed to be used on Lilia. Lilia is outstanding. This is such wicked single target damage. I have loved my Infernal Flame. It continues to be one of my favorite artifacts. It is extremely powerful. And since we're just doing mage artifacts, I suppose we just go on a tear and keep with it. So let's go and do the Phoenix Eye. I think this thing is probably an A. It is fat area of effect damage, and this thing is so good that it really makes me question, like, what am I doing with the Tear of Arbin? The Tear of Arbin is a defense-based artifact that does a big heal, but the word big is probably not the right word. It's a small heal. It's a very small heal. It's so small that it's like, okay, so I can heal my marches for like 2,000 per march, or I can do 10,000 damage per march with the Phoenix Eye. Well, I guess I'm just going to use the Phoenix Eye. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the mechanics and dynamics of healing and damage, and that's all. Maybe that's true, but like damage just seems better than healing in this instance, and I'm going to stick with that. So we're not quite done. However, with magic stuff yet. We need to talk about the Breath of Jargantus. And I'm probably going to put this one at a B for now. I may adjust some of these rankings as we go, okay? So we're building this list together, okay? We'll jam through this as we go. By the way, big shout out to Duz, who helped me map out where probably some of these artifacts belong and definitely changed my mind on a few of these. But we're going to put this Breath of Jargantus here at the B tier. This does a defensive break effect on 20 targets. 20 targets is insane. I cannot believe it. But this is a 5% artifact, which is, you know, not as good as the 7.5% artifacts for damage dealt and damage taken. I did max the Breath of Jargantus, which I don't regret exactly, but, it's not 20 targets in a circle. My apologies. It's still 10 targets, but 10 targets is still very, very hard to hit. The circle's too small. You're probably only hitting 5. Now, what does it do? It inflicts defense break on the target. That's a 32% break for 20 seconds. It is a massive debuff for a long time. Here is the upside of the Breath of Jargantus. You see, no matter how healthy or weak your march is, you're going to be getting the max effect of the Breath of Jargantus. The damage, however, of a damage artifact goes up or down based on the quantity of troops that are in your march. So the Phoenix Eye doesn't do very much for you when you're almost dead. The Breath of Jargantus is full strength when you're almost dead. The downside of the Breath of Jargantus is that it actually might not do anything unless you actually put damage onto those targets as a follow-up to having put the debuff. Now, if you're using Nico, then Breath of Jargantus and Nico in a separate march as a synergy is awesome because he does damage to targets that have the defense break applied, even if he didn't apply that himself. I'm pretty sure that all works that way. All right. Now, again, since we're here talking about mage stuff, The teleport staff is a really sweet utility item. You can teleport multiple marches in your proximity to another march, and that is really cool. It does need to be within the same zone, and that other march does need to be on your territory, however. So there are some restrictions, but I've used that to great effect. And gosh, like, I don't think we really qualify this as a magic item, but we'll take this guy right over here, the Springbird Feather. I'm just going to put it in a utility legendary spot. Gives march speed to your march, and also dust gives you march speed, and then boom, you just can make many marches move really, really quickly, which is very sweet. Also in the utility spot, we are looking at some epics here. So for utility, I'm going to throw these in, even though this is a legendary tier list, just because like some of these epics have cool utility. So this is a ring that freezes your march. And you may think, why do I want to freeze my march? Well, what I've seen people do is they run in, pop this, and the enemy doesn't figure out that they're invulnerable to damage while they have the ring active. And so they're just wasting their damage. It like just absorbs a ton of enemy damage if they don't understand what's happening, which is actually very good, as it turns out. This is an epic. Utility, it's cool. This is why I like the artifact system. Things like this exist. We can throw Magic Bomb on here as like, it's non-legendary, but it's very good. It actually has a cool utility role as well, which is that the army you apply a Magic Bomb onto cannot go back into its city. So that's really cool. It can't go in any city, by the way. So I think that effect is really, really gangbuster. Also, I suppose we could talk about the Staff of Spring. It's a healing effect. This really is very minimally used. I think that probably covers the majority of the mage artifacts that I want to talk about today. So let's jump on to the next category of troop here. Let's pick something near and dear to my heart. Let's go with infantry. And for infantry, the Spirit Bone Torque is so good. S tier, baby. Love this thing. Spirit Bone Torque is designed to be used on really any infantry that are tanking, but Goresh and Chisgule take great advantage of this thing. They are doing so much counterattack. It forces enemies to hit you, which makes it so that then they just get wrecked by the counterattack damage from Goresh and Chisgule. It literally will make an enemy that is running away from you turn around and walk towards you. I mean, if that kind of a stun lock isn't impressive to you, I genuinely don't know what will be. This thing is goated as can be. It's so good. It's so good. And on the topic of so good, we got to put the Dragon Scale armor probably up at the A tier. It is very tanky. Infantry are designed to be tanky. I like what it's doing. It's got some decent synergy with a Frost Bear, which means if you're using Madeline, this is pretty cool to use. It's got health, which is pretty cool. I like this thing. It's very good. I would say that it's not S tier. I used to put it at S tier. The Spirit Bone Torque has kind of taken the title there, and I don't want to have a zillion things at S tier. So the reality is that when new things come into the game, it power creeps other things out, which brings us to the hammer. I'm going to put the hammer at A. And the hammer is basically the infantry equivalent of the Phoenix Eye. It does huge area of effect damage and a stun, which stuns are cool, man. I'm into it. Big damage, big stun. I wish I had this thing. I don't. To max an artifact is a pretty penny, so you got to pick and choose. I didn't pick and choose that one. I've got the Spirit Bone Torque. I've got the Dragon Scale armor. I'm only running 2 infantry. I'm good. Now, a free-to-play alternative to these artifacts I've shared so far is actually going to be right over here, the Fang of Ashkari. I'm probably going to put this at a B. It is a solid defense artifact that you could actually use on things other than infantry, but it puts down a field on the ground that does damage to enemies that are standing in it. It's very cool. Powerful effect. You can use this technically to cheeseburger. That's where you pop out of a city. It has a low rage cost to activate. And then boom, you pop this thing, go back into a city. You get nice area of effect damage field on the ground. There was originally a time in the game where there was no cooldown on this thing when you went back into a city, which was an exploit. That got patched up because this was too powerful when you could do that, let me tell you. Now, there are a couple other infantry artifacts we need to talk about, but I would probably put them into C. And these are damage-based artifacts. This artifact does area of effect damage. Also, there's an artifact that does single target damage. Here it is. Boom. These artifacts are cool. The Dragon Rift. I think it's the Springs of Silence. They're fine, but like, it's really not what infantry are there to do. Theoretically, and I am very, 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 very interested in this. Theoretically, you could make a ball of like 5 infantry marches at some point, and like maybe you could do cool things where like, you know, you got one with the hammer and the other one's taunting and the other ones are more like bruiser marches that are tanky-ish, but there to hit hard. There could be a world in which I'm like all about these artifacts. Today's meta is not that world, all right? So I want to be really clear, and I got to, you know, put those down where I think they kind of belong, and for now, that's C tier. Maybe I would even bump them lower potentially, because it's just not what infantry are there to do. Infantry are there to soak damage. All right, this brings us to some marksman stuff. Marksmen have some fun toys. Let's talk about what the marksmen get to use. First of all, the gold crest. I would have put this at a B because I find the targeting very difficult to use. Often I will target something that then ends up outside of my range and then I'm stuck in a targeting window. But with auto cast now being in the game, I would jump this up to an A. I think it's solid. I think it's quite solid. I enjoy it. It's powerful. The net effect if you're using Freygar is good. Do I think this artifact is totally cracked? No. I mean, like, there are some really good, really good marksman artifacts. In fact, let's just throw them up here. All right. You've got these two artifacts here and here. It's the Viola's Bow, all right, and the Shadow Blades that are amazing area of effect damage. So good. And, the Viola's Bow trades off a little bit of damage, I believe, for a silence effect where the enemy can't use artifacts. Both of these are very powerful, and the Shadow Blades are very accessible in the game. So you could be using Shadow Blades on your marksman and you are in a great spot. Honestly, it's so good. Marksmen have some really incredible tools at their disposal. Speaking of which, we got to put the Rattle Spear on this list. Now, I had Rattle Spear in A. Actually, it was S. I had it in S. And Does might have convinced me to move it down to A. I'm not so sure. I think for now, I might want to leave it at S. But the thing about the Rattle Spear that I didn't realize is that when you use this artifact, it's going to throw 3 spears, but that takes place over time. And if you move while that's happening, you don't throw all your spears. So you actually have to be standing still to throw all your spears. Now you can cancel out of the targeting window and still throw all your spears. But if you move, you won't throw them all. I didn't know that about the Rattle Spear. But the thing I like about the Rattle Spear is that it's got a passive effect. Whenever you inflict a defense break, I believe you get an additional 20% defense penetration. I'm going to look this up while we talk and see if I actually got that right from the top of my head. I did. You get 20% defense penetration on your Legion for 7 seconds. Whew, dang. So that passive effect is very good. It's very good. I think for that reason, I'm going to keep the Rattle Spear here, but it does take a long time to actually get the Rattle Spear to do its thing. By the way, it also inflicts a slow on the enemy, so it's less likely to get away. But on a hero like Kanara or Nico, the Rattle Spear is exceptional. Now, do you need a Rattle Spear? Hey, look, depends on how many marksmen you're running. Like, Shadow Blades are amazing, man. They're so good, which I think at this point brings us to Cavalry legendaries. So let's start talking about some Cavalry legendaries, all right? And I've got some mixed thoughts on some of these, so you keep me honest here, all right? But first things first, these blades right over here are so good, all right? We're talking about the spring blades. These are the spring blades. What is the other thing that I called the spring blades earlier? Hold on, now I gotta figure this out. Oh, it's Springs of Silence. The infantry one is Springs of Silence. These are the spring blades. The spring blades go up here because the damage is insane and the passive effect is fantastic. You gain 30% attack. I love these things, man. So good. Spring blades are a phenomenal cavalry artifact. Now, if you're using Ferondel specifically, I do think the Oath of the Storm Peak is pretty good and better than I originally thought. The number of people I'm tricking by summoning a clone is really shocking. And even if my clone isn't getting any value, I am getting 10% more rampage damage when I've got this thing maxed out. So I think I probably want to have this at A, even though that might be a little aggressive because honestly, the effect can be very powerful. It's just not as much raw power. Like, it actually requires you to be sneaky or extra skillful when you use it. And in some ways, you could even argue to bump it down to a B. I might do that. So here's the problem with it right now. The problem with it is that when you activate Oath of the Storm Peak, it clones your Legion, but the clone and your main Legion drop their rage bars. And for that reason, I think I gotta bump it down. If you're really sneaky, you might be able to evade enemy damage if you time it just right. But the fact that you lose your rage bar for me is a bit of a deal breaker. I think I do need to bump that one down from where I had it. Which brings us to the Sorlin's Blade, which I'll put up here probably for now at a B tier. It gives you march speed and damage on your calves. I've used it to march speed balance my cavalry to make sure they're both going the same speed when I go long distances, which, hey, that's what cavalry do, baby. That is what cavalry do. And I like it for that, but I think the Kingslayer is the A tier artifact for calves. The thing's awesome. It's damage. It's got an execute effect when an enemy is low enough. It instantly finishes them. Yeah, I really like this legendary. And the funny thing about cavalry is there are so many cavalry legendaries. I'm not sure if I should be putting these at C tier or if I should put them in utility. Because really, like, you'd want to use these for maybe more like utility. But I'm just going to drop in here the Storm Arrows. I'm going to drop in here the Wolf Woman of Healer, and let's talk about what these do. The Storm Arrows give you a targeted teleport to a specific location. You can go up mountains, you can go across rivers, but the reality is that many of those obstacles you won't be able to traverse unless you have these up to tier 5 of their skill. So they do really cool things, but you would never just use these for the sake of using them. I have seen this used on infantry. Specifically, the teleport effect over here from the Wolf Woman of Healer on infantry is a curious one. What does it do? The Wolf Woman of Healer teleports you to a location, but then also teleports you back, and you can activate that teleport back when you want. So what I've seen people do is they use this thing to teleport their infantry behind an enemy. The enemy can't retreat. And then if they get in trouble, they activate it to go back home, or at the end of the 15 seconds, they go back home. Or if you step into a resource node, or technically a city, you don't get teleported back to your original position. So you can use this like a Storm Arrows if you have a resource node to jump into. It's really not quite the same, but the effect is very cool. You can actually travel cool places doing this. It's a very powerful effect, but you know, it's utility. Like I almost don't want it on this list. I almost need to put it into that utility column, and I'm actually tempting doing that, but let's just keep going on the legendaries here. And in fact, now we get to the universal legendaries, right? So you've got this peacekeeping legendary, which is going to give you some peacekeeping damage. Kind of cool. There is one more marksman artifact we'll talk about in a minute here. I skipped over it. We'll get back to it. This artifact over here, Breath of the Forest, this is for defending your city. I'm going to put it at a B. It's for defending your city or really any stronghold. And it's got a series of different effects that can trigger. But the reason I say city is that it benefits all troop types. So you can have in your city many different troop types, and it's giving stats to all of them, which ends up being a really big deal. Is it an insanely powerful artifact? No. Is it very niche in its use? I mean, yeah, for defending objective, it's very good. People often use this in Roots of War for their garrison. Powerful. It's strong. And it is way better than the Bloodblade Banner. I used the Bloodblade Banner, and I was kind of disappointed. I rallied with it. I actually maxed it out. 2 seasons ago, I said, oh, I kind of wish I'd maybe used the Bloodblade Banner instead of the Gold Crest when I rallied with archers. But then I tried it, and it was not as good as just the Gold Crest. I think just the raw damage, that's 2.5% extra damage dealt and taken because it's a 7.5% artifact. I think that aspect of the Gold Crest just made it better. Bloodblade Banner was definitely a bummer for me. Is Bloodblade Banner good on day 1 of a new server? Yes. Is it good in season 3 and 4? I don't think so. I'm not sure what combination I'd need to be using to want to use the Bloodblade Banner over other artifacts I have at my disposal. Which, I mean, I might just use one of those things to rip it apart and take everything that I put into it as fodder, quite frankly. Is what it is. The final item here that I want to talk about is Visage of the Sanctus. This is actually designed for flyers. I think I would put it at C. We can put it at the front of C. What does this do? It grants you these marks every time you deploy a shield. And then after some number of seconds, you clear your marks and do damage factor based on the number of shields you've been throwing around, okay? This is designed for flying units. It's really meant for Thea. And it gives flying unit defense and legion attack, which is kind of a quirky combination of things. Could this be good? Yes. Do you really need this? I'm not sure you do right now. You do need to have another legion nearby, potentially, to take full advantage of this. Technically, you can target your own legion. So this also grants you 3 shields. to a selected legion. I think it's 1 shield per second, which like, hey, for, you know, Thea, every time she gains a shield, she makes it so that your attack is increased. There is some coolness to it. It is some good damage mitigation. I just find that shielding and healing, I don't know, maybe I'm missing the point on those, but I'd almost rather be doing 10,000 damage instead of 2,000 shield. And I get that protecting my own troops is very cool, but it just seems like the damage is worth more to me than the shield, all right? Now, this brings us to the final artifact. The final artifact here is a Marksman Artifact. I actually unintentionally looked it over, which tells you where I'm going with this already. It is the Heart of Kamasi. Now, the Heart of Kamasi is kind of a weird one. This is making it so that you gain physical keen. It is granting it to your legion and 2 nearby friendly legions, but it only affects marksman legions. So you have to have 2 other marksmen nearby to take full effect of this. So you need 3 marksman marches nearby, and it's giving you that physical keen, that's an attack boost of 30%, and it also gives you an onslaught boost, that is a normal attack damage boost of 30%. Now, that is pretty cool. Now, the duration of this is a 10-second duration. So the onslaught effect, I mean, look, boosting your normal attack for Sindri and Freygar is very good, given that they're doing 2 normal attacks per turn on many of their turns. But I'm not in love with the Earthen Judgment. I feel like as we get more marksmen in the game, maybe I will be more excited about this. But for now, because I'm certainly not even using 3 marksman marches, and I'm considering using 3 marksman marches, by the way, like I'm really considering it because I think it could be cool. I probably put this at the D tier for now. Do I think this could be better? Yes. When I think we have more marksmen in the game, will it be cool? Yes. But do we have many other marksman artifacts that I think I would prefer over this? The answer also is yes. Do I like the Rattlespear more? Yes. Do I like the Goldcrest more? Yes. Do I like the Shadowblades more? Yes. Do I like the Viola's Bow more? Yes. Like, maybe I'm being unfair to this thing, putting it in a D. Maybe it should just be ranked higher, but I'm not using enough marksmen to justify this. And even when they release new marksmen in the game, they're gonna send a new artifact with it, right? So if they put out a new artifact to go with it, I mean, aren't we just gonna be ideally using that? So I think that is where I would rank all of these artifacts. It's a pretty sweet list, and I feel pretty good about where these are at. Maybe there are a few adjustments I would make, but overall, I'd say this is pretty good. If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here. Consider subscribing to the channel for more Call of Dragons videos designed to help you get value and smash your enemies. Obviously, there's a lot of new epic artifacts that are really solid as well. And I didn't even cover all the utility artifacts here because these are epics and it's more of a legendary tier list. Although I suppose this artifact right over here summons a resource node. That's legendary. That's great. 10 out of 10, love that guy. This one over here teleports you to a resource node. Totally worthless. It'll teleport you next to a resource node that somebody else is already going to. I don't want that. I never want that. In terms of utility, I mean, instantly gathering from resource nodes is amazing. That's an epic though. This guy clears debuffs. Kind of cool. I think it's a spirit bonds, spirit, I don't know, spirit something or other, right? This is a homing flower. Teleports you home, back to your city. Kind of cool if you go a long way to get something. The taunt helmet over here, this guy's blue. Amazing utility on this thing, right? These are all cool. If you're a new player, you might be like, ooh, yes, tell me more about these artifacts I have obtained. This cloak is really cool. You can actually build things while invisible. Kind of neat. People do this all the time. They're like, hold up, let me get my cloak. And they go build while invisible. On the topic of building, this guy gives you a bunch of engineering boost. Right? And then these are all epics that are damage related. And there are some cool ones in here, but this is really not an epic list, even though it's tempting to just like talk about them because I love artifacts in this game. I actually genuinely really appreciate the artifact system of this game. I wish I had more artifacts, but we all know that the Forgilite, it'll run you a pretty penny to go max out an artifact. And in general, I think the ones all the way at the top there, you move in on those and you will not regret your investment. In the A tier, those are also really outstanding. But if you're going to invest in an A tier artifact, you really need to have many marches of that troop type. Otherwise, you should have just done an S tier. See what I mean? See what I mean? And at the B tier, you really need to have like 3 marches you're running of that troop type to get value out of it, because the weirdness of artifacts, and I'll just lay it out there for you. If you made it this far in the video, again, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. You get the wisdom of your boy Chisgule here. The weirdness of artifacts is that at some point, you know, the game's been around a couple years, the beginning artifacts are going to be completely worthless to you. At the end of the day, they release new heroes, and new heroes come with new artifacts, and those new artifacts are better than the older artifacts, and they're designed to be used with the new heroes. So if you're running around mostly with the new heroes, what are you doing with the old artifacts? The situation where you're very happy about old artifacts are as follows. If you ultimately want to run, let's say you get to a point where you have a lot of troops. If you're running like 5 marches of a troop type, then building depth in a troop type is amazing. Amazing, right? Like when I was talking about running 5x infantry, right? Like then all your infantry artifacts get really, really cool. And having lots of infantry artifacts gets really, really cool, right? Same is true for marksmen. At some point, I think this game will reach a state where everybody is like, all right, I'm running 5x mages, or all right, I'm running 5x infantry. When you have enough troops and you gain enough power, and this is like years down the road, I really think for most players, this is years down the road, there will be enough diversity and stamina will be enough of an issue that like potentially you make these specialized groupings for specialized moments in the game. The only reason that's not more of a thing now is because it still takes experience to level up your heroes. So for as long as they're still making us start at level 30 and leveling up, and looks like they're increasing the amount of stamina you get in the current season we're in, T1. Maybe that's not as much of a thing, but I don't know. Over time, I feel like you're going to get to that 5 march point, but then what happens after that, right? Like you will never need more than 5 artifacts of a troop type, unless they make it so you could use 6 marches at a time, 7 marches at a time. Like, will they have policies for that? I don't know, man. Now I'm going off the deep end. If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. If you want to see the full combination of everything I'm using this season, I'll have a card in the end screen in just a second. You can go check that one out. That is every march with the heroes, pets, talents, artifact combinations that I'm using. Alternatively, if you're looking for a hero tier list, I'll have a card in the end screen for that as well. Until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.